Welcome to Life Beyond Abortion, the podcast where we delve into the untold stories and experiences surrounding abortion. Stories often missing from everyday conversations, media reports, and even other podcast interviews. I'm your host, Melissa Ohden, the founder and CEO of the Abortion Survivors Network. As the author of You Carried Me, A Daughter's Memoir, and Abortion Survivors Break Their Silence, I've had the privilege of hearing the most powerful stories from some of the most resilient and courageous individuals. These stories and these people have profoundly transformed my life, and I believe they have the power to transform yours as well. Together, we will amplify these voices, share the truths that they illuminate, and challenge our culture to recognize what life is truly like beyond abortion. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Life Beyond Abortion. As you know, I am honored to amplify the voices of people whose experiences really fly in the face of the narrative about abortion in our culture. And one of the ways that we educate people and we change hearts and minds is not only by amplifying the voices of people who have been impacted by abortion, but also who have been impacted by other experiences that are more life affirming. Today's guest, Brittany Paladino, is one of those people whose experiences really give us a new perspective about what life is like beyond abortion. So I invite you to sit down and join Britt and I for this conversation. Britt, thanks for joining me today.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Melissa.
You have a courageous voice. You are someone who has overcome many things in your life that I think a lot of people can relate to. And so I'm hoping that we can, talk about that today, because I think that's part of what's missing in our culture is just the ability to understand someone else, maybe sit in their shoes a little bit. And I think that's part of what it leads people to a better understanding of what life is like, maybe beyond abortion and beyond adoption as well. So I just want to kick it to you first and foremost to tell the audience a little bit about what you've overcome in your life.
Sure. Well, there's, as you have clearly pointed out, there's a lot of runway there. But I think as far as it relates to the conversation, first and foremost, I became a widow at 38 with a 2-year-old, which was very traumatic and no doubt life-changing. It changed the entire trajectory of my life. But as part of being a young widow, as I've come to understand, it's common to get in relationships early on in widowhood, not because anyone's looking for a relationship, but because they're trying to deal with the grief and the loss that's just pervading their entire life. So I did just that. I got into a relationship that I didn't really have any business being in, and soon after found myself pregnant. So here I am, a young widow, within the first year of widowhood, now pregnant. And what was I going to do with that? And I'll be honest with you, and I'm always honest when I share this story, because people want to know, did I ever consider abortion as part of the solution to my crisis? And the answer is yes, of course I did. In fact, I feel like most women give this at least a passing thought. The attractiveness was I could take care of this. No one would have to know. My family wouldn't have to know. My in-laws wouldn't have to know. But at the end of the day, being a Christian, I knew that I would know, and I knew that God would know. And so the conversation in my mind turned from should I have an abortion to how do I place for adoption? And I did pursue adoption fairly early on in my pregnancy, even though it was just an idea, but I didn't really get serious about seeking an agency to place with until probably about 5 or 6 months into my pregnancy.
And one of the things that I appreciate about you is you are very vulnerable, right? In sharing those pieces of your life that, again, I think a lot of people, men and women, can relate to. What it's like to be in a state of crisis and need and choices that we make, even as believers. And then the vulnerability to say, here I am walking through this. And I remember so distinctly watching video of you sharing your story because of your amazing mother, right? Who
Yes.
let me know about you all those years ago. But I think I would love to hear from you because you can really insert some wisdom into this audience about how did the church do well coming alongside you, and maybe where did the church struggle?
Well, one church I would say didn't do very well at all, and another church really saved my life. And so, if we want to talk about the church aspect, I had let members of my church know. It was a group of women that I was friends with. I was a member of that church, even. I let them know what was going on in my life for matters of prayer only. That I had asked them to pray for me. Obviously, walking through a situation like this, a crisis in the middle of a crisis, and having to make a big decision like this, I was seeking prayer and I was seeking women to come alongside me and walk with me spiritually and emotionally through the experience. Instead, they ended up talking to other members in the church about me rather than praying for me. And so then my pastor had quickly found out what was going on, and he sent me an email, and he decided that he was going to let the entire church know what was going on in my life while I was in Florida and they were in Massachusetts. So I think early on I was like, well, is this something that he should be doing? Is this just my flesh that is saying you shouldn't be doing this? So I consulted with the pastor of the church I was attending in Florida. And I said, is this something that I should let him do? And he said, oh, no, Brittany, obviously he's misinformed. I'm going to give him a call and I'm going to explain to him kind of where you're at and where your heart's at. And we can get this figured out. And then the next week he told me, no, he does fully intend to let the church know what's going on in your life, which, in matters of church discipline is not biblical. So I withdrew from the church. I withdrew my membership. I worked with the church, and I call them out by name because I love them so much. The Fifth Street Baptist Church in Key West, Florida, really was the church that saved my life, because in the middle of dealing with this church and then everything I was dealing with, and I was trying to do this alone. I thought in my crazy mind that I was going to go to Key West. I was going to place this baby for adoption, and I was going to come home and nobody was going to know about it. But that didn't happen, thankfully. So I let the church at Fifth Street Baptist Church know what I was going with, and they really walked me through this whole experience, because when the enemy couldn't convince me to abort this child, the enemy then convinced me that basically we should abort both of us. I used to have fantasies of throwing myself off the 7 Mile Bridge, and just listening to the lie that my now 3-year-old daughter would be better off without me. But thank you, Jesus, none of that happened. I'm still here, everybody's fine. But the Fifth Street Baptist Church was really the church that saved my life. So we have one church that, in my opinion, did not do a good job, and now we have another church that did a great job. So I would not say that wholesale the church doesn't do a good job of walking people through these types of crises. But I think that there is a lot of misunderstanding in the church about how to walk someone through a crisis like this.
So the church in Florida, it sounds like, did not shame you. Their
No.
behaviors were unconditional love, accompaniment, and I think that's a key takeaway for me, right? For people who are listening who are going, man, whether it's, within the walls of our church or maybe within our family, I know somebody who's going through something and I have no idea how to be a helpful support,
Yes.
accompaniment, non judgmental, unconditional love.
Yes, my first step, I would say, first, if someone's coming to you for prayer, no matter what the crisis is, whether you agree with the crisis or not, the answer is prayer. I will pray for you. Secondly, praying for wisdom. What are the resources in the area to help this person in their crisis? Going to the professionals, I would say. If if you don't know who those professionals could be in terms of a pregnancy, your first stop should be the pregnancy resource center that's most closest to you, because they're usually connected to resources that can help a woman in crisis. So, and seeking those things out and talking to other people, do they know who can help in a crisis? Who are the professionals that can come alongside this person to help them in their crisis? I would say things that probably aren't a good idea is to try to be this person's therapist, to try to be this person's rescuer or savior. I would say your prayer and finding out, getting some wisdom about how to help would be the best first steps.
Thank you for sharing that. You know, this may be a very in depth question. So if I'm way off the mark, you know me that you can just be like, nope, pivot. But I'm thinking that maybe people who are listening are wondering, okay, Brittany, you are strong and courageous and you are a believer and you had an incredible church that loved you well. But how did you navigate family dynamics or conversations related to adoption? Because I think this is where, honestly, more people might be willing to consider adoption if they knew how to navigate the interpersonal dynamics of it, because it is awkward to say the least, uncomfortable. We don't know how to manage this. So help us out.
Definitely, even for myself, but for the loads of women that I've helped in the last 14 years navigate this particular issue. And I would say it is an issue, and it's also difficult for everybody. In my own personal life, my mother did not want me to place for adoption. She was very adamant that I should parent this child, but I knew, just given the circumstances, that that wasn't going to be a good idea. She wanted another grandchild. I got that, but I was not prepared or emotionally or spiritually or just physically capable of parenting another child, especially with the dynamics of the father involved. So that was, we had a lot of hang up arguments. There was a lot of texting back and forth, but I held fast to my decision because I knew it was the right decision. And I knew at the end of the day, my mom wasn't going to have to live with my decision half as much as I was going to. And that's really a lot of what I told her. I had another family member text me and tell me that I was an embarrassment to the family and I was an embarrassment to them. That hurt a lot. It still hurts in places. I'll be honest with you. I'm human, right? I forgive, but I do feel feelings too. And so a lot of women come to me and say, I don't know if I can do this because of X, because how am I going to tell my mother? How am I going to tell my father? So and so is going to hate me. And, or I've already had a conversation and my mother has already told me that absolutely I'm not placing for adoption. So how do I navigate that? And I think at the end of the day, these are the things that I tell her. You are going to have to parent this child. Loads of people want to help you when it's an idea and it's a new baby, and new babies smell good and they're squishy and they're cute, and everybody wants to help. But you know what? That help wanes. And I have heard this conversation from countless women too. Everybody was going to help at the beginning, but by 2 and 3, nobody really wanted to help anymore. And now, she is faced with, how do I get a job? How do I deal with childcare? How do I deal with all the reasons that I wanted to place that are now actually reality? What do I do now? And I usually hear from those women in crisis. So it's unfortunate when those things happen. But at the end of the day, she's the parent. She has to decide for herself how she's going to make this work, parenting or placing for adoption, because placing for adoption is a parenting decision. So as this child's unborn, as this child's parent of this unborn child, I made a parenting decision to place her for adoption. And I placed her in an open adoption, and it has been a good experience. So I bet I can't guarantee that for everybody, right? So what are the decisions? Why are you making the decision now? If you decide to parent, what is that going to look like? Factoring out, so everybody decides to abandon you and not help, how are you going to parent then? Because you really can't factor in other people's emotions into your decision. And then secondly, coming around, that's where I talk about the professionalism and resources. What are the resources around to help her continue in her decision to place? And there are resources available and there are people to help. So just helping her and working with a right ethical adoption agency, legal, ethical, moral, spiritual, all the right things, working with the right adoption agency who's going to help steer her in the direction that she wants to go, not where they want her to go necessarily, because people do change their mind. Circumstances change, and then parenting just comes back into the picture, and that should be okay.
And you just dropped so many nuggets of wisdom there. So I want to kind of reiterate one particular point that you made. And I can still remember hearing you say this for the first time years ago, and it still hits me hard in every good way. Making an adoption plan is a parenting decision,
Yes.
a significant one.
Life-changing one, and permanent. And that's kind of when I'm talking to women when we're talking through things. You know, abortion is a permanent decision. Parenting, permanent decision. Adoption, permanent decision. All three of these are hard. They all have life-changing consequences. So it really depends on which heart are you choosing and what are you willing to live with.
What do you feel like has helped you the most on your journey as a birth mother?
For me, I think being in friendship and community with other birth mothers has certainly helped. They have not all had a good experience like I have, and so it's important for me to recognize that there are those stories too. Secondly, I have a good open adoption, and I have a good open adoption because me and her adoptive mom, as two Christians, have been committed to building a relationship with one another. And that started early on. And so when I'm coaching other women who are walking through this experience, I tell them that forget about having a relationship with this baby for the first 3 or 4 years of life, because they're not going to have a relationship with you. But what you build with the adoptive mom primarily, because let's face it, a birth mom is going to primarily have a relationship with the adoptive mother. The type of relationship and the closeness that you build with her is going to factor into your relationship later on with the child. So the daughter that I placed, who I publicly refer to as Alex, is now 14, almost 15, and I can't believe it. But she sees the relationship that I have with her mom, and that makes her feel comfortable and secure in her adoption story, because she doesn't see any dynamics of competitiveness or bitterness or anything like that between the two of us.
And I love that. That is one of those things, even though my birth mother and my mom, my adoptive mom, didn't establish a relationship until much later in life because of the dynamics of our experience. One of the things that brings me so much joy is knowing that those two mothers of mine have an incredible relationship. They are not in competition, right? They've both had to do their own healing. And again, our experience is very unique, but I know that my two moms communicate more often with one another than I do with either one of them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think, her name's Kelly. Kelly and I communicate pretty regularly just about things, things going on, holidays, communication about when we might be in each other's areas to be able to see each other, because they do live in another state. So I see them probably twice a year. Sometimes once a year. It just depends on the circumstances, but we're in regular communication. Alex and I, she's now old enough where she can text me directly, and we communicate directly too, which I love. But part of being a birth mom is also understanding my role, that I do have a role in this child's life and I do have a role in their family, but it looks differently than parenting. So I guess maybe I look like the fun aunt or the fun, fun friend of the mom, I guess. But but there is a closeness between the two of us. Alex and I both collect heart-shaped rocks. I didn't know that about her until I showed her my collection. I just said, I want to show you that, God sends me heart-shaped rocks and I have this collection. And she said, oh, I collect heart-shaped rocks too. So it's kind of a cool thing that she and I share.
That's amazing. And I think that's the beauty, is understanding the connection that will always exist between the two of you, and really trusting that God continues to be present in those details. I think, and this may sound weird, but I sort of feel like sometimes people don't give themselves enough credit to be able to manage hard situations. And maybe that's just the culture that we live in that sort of puts people in that position to say, nah, you can't handle that, right? Abortion is a better option. You can't manage these difficult life circumstances. And we can.
We can. I mean, you have to factor in God, right? Like, God brings people through some incredible things that they could never have envisioned for themselves personally. And so a lot of what I say is, people want to know why I'm doing so well. And I've been asked that for years. Like, how are you doing so well? You've come through so much. Because Jesus, I would not be this well without him. And I wouldn't be this well without godly support too. I've had your support over the years and lots of others who have really encouraged me along the way. And we've kind of all watched each other grow up in the pro-life space, which has kind of been neat too. So it's good to know I have people in my space that support me, not just in my decision from a pro-life perspective, but also spiritually as well.
For people who are wondering, what resources exist, Brittany, for women who are considering an adoption placement, or, maybe organizations who are saying, I want to do better, right? I want to do better when it comes to supporting a woman who is considering adoption. Where do people turn? What are some of the resources you typically point people to?
I point people to Brave Love. Brave Love it's not an adoption agency, so I would say to the woman who's considering but is not ready to talk to an adoption agency, Brave Love has some great resources. They have videos, video stories, testimonies from other birth moms, and they have just information that you should know. National Council for Adoption also has great resources if you're not ready to talk to an agency yet. If you are ready to talk to an agency, I would say connect with Brave Love because they have a list of resources of good, ethical, morally correct adoption agencies that you can work with, and they've been vetted. So I would say consult on their website, and I do point to people for them first before you're ready to talk to an agency. As far as if you're a professional pregnancy resource center, I would also point you to Brave Love because, like I said, they have this list by state of adoption agencies that are partnered with them. So there's some vetting there that goes on. As far as post-placement resources, because I've gotten tons of those over the years, pregnancy resource centers calling me saying, we have this woman that walked in, she's just placed a couple of weeks ago or a month ago, she's looking to us for help. We don't know how to help her. Abiding Love Charities is a national organization that supports birth mothers post-placement as well as adoptive families, how to have a healthy open adoption, how to keep that adoption healthy and open, and then adoptee resources. How do you feel good about your adoption story, and what are the resources that you can take advantage of if you don't? So I would say those two ones are the ones that I point to the most. And then National Council for Adoption, they do a lot of resource on adoption. So if you're a professional in the space, you want to know more about what are the trends in adoption, what is the resource that's sort of bearing out, one of those would be overwhelmingly in support of open adoption. I know people get a little nervous about that, but for the health and well-being of the adoptee as well as the birth parent and the adoptive family, open adoption is overwhelmingly the better option. So I would point to those three resources primarily.
Definitely. And I appreciate you sharing those. And I echo your sentiment on those resources. Brave Love in particular is one that I have just absolutely loved over the years. Even just, I mean, I know your heart for good marketing and branding, and their website is something that I have always found to be so beautiful. And it's not just, right, the aesthetics of it, but it's the stories that people can enter into, and just knowing the support that they offer to birth mothers in particular. So thank you.
Absolutely. It's run by a birth mother. Janelle Bisham is a birth mother, and that's a new addition. Laura Bruder was the CEO before, who was great. I mean, I've known Laura since Brave Love was, this big. And so, but Janelle has been a great addition as far as being a birth parent, and seeing things from that perspective. So the additions on the website that you've seen in the last year are reflecting that.
Yeah, those are the things I know that we could geek out about for a long time as well.
Definitely, that's my professional experience is marketing and content. So
Absolutely. Brittany, you are, a wealth of information. And so maybe somebody is listening and they have a question for you, or maybe they just want to, send you a quick note of thanks. Is there a way that people can get in touch with you directly?
absolutely, my website, brittpaladino.com. You can shoot me a form on Contact Us. My email address is right on top of the header as well. If you want to find out more about what I talk about and some of the things that I might share on my blog, you can certainly check that out as well. I do welcome speaking engagement opportunities too. So if that's of interest to you, you can just shoot me a Contact Us form and I'll get right back to you.
That's wonderful. Britt Paladino, Paladino.com. And I can vouch for you. You are a great speaker. And in today's world, that's an incredible opportunity for people to educate about adoption and really start to touch people who, maybe have their own adoption story and aren't talking about it. So as you've shared, right, just having a space where you connect with other people, you're a great magnet for people to receive support and healing.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. That is the heart of my ministry work, is to help women find their value in Christ, and that I do that for a variety of places, and pro-life and women in crisis, especially with pregnancy, is one of them.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It was a great conversation.
It was a great conversation. And for you, the audience, I really hope that you listened in closely, leaned into everything that Brittany and I talked about today. I think you can relate to many of the things she talked about in her life. And I really do encourage you, pass this along to other people who need to learn more about adoption and the support that we need to offer to women who are considering adoption, or maybe who have made an adoption plan in the past. Do follow us, right? Like, subscribe, pass this along, and consider how we can continue to support life beyond abortion for all.
Life Beyond Abortion is a podcast presentation of the Herzog Foundation. The views and opinions on the show are those of the host and her guest, and not necessarily those of the Herzog Foundation. You can find out more about Melissa's work at melissaohden.com or by following her on Instagram at melissaohden. Be sure to like and subscribe to the show so that you never miss an episode of Life Beyond Abortion.